You're listening to Eat, Play, Sex with Dr. Kat, the place to up-level that sexy life of yours, with expert talk on sex, love, and nutrition.
The food system today, in comparison to how our grandparents and our parents lived, changed very dramatically in the 1950s when there was wars around the world, and they had to create foods and revenue streams from subsidies that they gave to the farmers. So there were certain food groups that before were very, very healthy. And then all of a sudden, our farming industry became very manufactured, I guess. It was the same time that they were manufacturing things in big factories and stuff like that. So factory, that's where the term factory farming and things like that came into play. So it wasn't always this way. And that's why I don't want to blanket that these foods are completely terrible and you have to avoid them. There are still places around the world where you can eat, these food groups, and they're actually good for you, but they're made in a very different way. But what happened here, especially in America, the government subsidized certain crops. So we have wheat, corn, soy, and dairy and the meat industry. The government subsidized and helped to keep this afloat, but then they had this overflow of crops that they now use in every single food that you will find in the supermarket between the aisles. Anything on the outside is fresh and will go off in your fridge within the week. That's where I tell my clients to shop, because it's real live food. Yeah. Anything that is in between is generally something that's in a packet. And the reason why it was produced like this is because it could, stay on a shelf and could feed people in areas where they didn't have access to fresh food in times of famine and war and stuff like that. So unfortunately, with all of this subsidies, they had an overflow of all these crops, and they started to also learn how to grow these crops at really large amounts by genetically modifying them. So there are crops that have been scientifically intervened, genetically modified, so that the bugs wouldn't eat these certain crops. And now these crops are being fed also to our livestock. So corn and soy gets fed to our livestock. So, and now our livestock, when I say livestock, we're talking like beef, our cat and pigs, chickens. They're predominantly, if they're wild and in their natural state, they eat things like grass and worms and things that grow in the earth. And if you look at the older model, which is more like biodynamic, where you actually your animals eat the grass and then they poop and then they fertilize and then the new plants grow there. So it's like a much more of a really beautiful ecosystem. We've now removed that from our food. And so both the crops themselves are genetically modified. So when I say genetically modified, that's why I talk about the bugs, but now we're eating these crops that have been inserted with these. I'm trying to explain this in the best way possible, we're now eating these foods that have these Monsanto seeds that have been genetically modified. So we don't know the long-term effects of the genetically modified crops, but there is a link between the shift in our food system and to this day, carcinogenic cancers build up in our bodies of toxins and all of these autoimmune conditions that are kind of appearing out of nowhere. Not to mention, we've also moved to a much faster paced society. We're online, we're stressed, where, there's more toxins in the environment from cars and planes and pollutants from fertilizers off our, to stop the bugs from eating things. We've really kind of evolved as human beings in such an incredible way, but a rate that I don't think our ecosystem can catch up with it. So there's all these extra toxins that are happening, and there's all these build-up effects that are happening to us, but we're not knowing the long-term effects until now. So a lot more of these studies are coming out. I'm kind of off track and forget the original question.
No, this is great. So when you are working with somebody who comes to you and they're like, hey, I was diagnosed with cancer or lymphoma, and you're first talking to them about changing their lifestyle, are there specific types of food that you tend to move them towards to help treat that?
Yes. So that was the point of the conversation. So the 5 kind of food groups, which can be the most triggering when it comes to disease in the body, or carcinogenic, as in it can cause cancer in the body. We restart by just removing these from the diet to help the body get a reset and reset. And because of these chemicals in our body, that's what I was talking about with the brain fog and certain things, we're kind of numbing. So Dairy and gluten are the two ones that I always start with. Like I said, this is not for everybody. This is just, we start with this as like a reset. So you'd come to me, my protocol would be to take out these 5 food groups, which are known to be the most triggering in the body. And so gluten for sure is one of them. It's the most, wheat, unfortunately, is the most genetically modified crop here in America, and it is in everything. And it just has severe, inflammation in the body, and inflammation is where disease is caused. So that's our number one thing that we would remove. I'd start with gluten, and gluten has, I think, it's such a broad thing. It's in so many foods, but it's just that rule, which I mentioned before, is like anything that comes from a packet, I also try and tell people to avoid. So gluten is anything from pasta to, some grains and rices, and any packaged goods, snacks, crisps, cakes, all of these things tend to have gluten.
I like them.
But the good thing is there's so many beautiful ingredients that you can use, which are just not these triggering inflammatory things. So dairy would be the second one. Again, dairy is one of those things that in certain countries that they do it in the old school way. It's beautiful, but unfortunately our dairy cows here, again, in America, are fed wheat, corn, and they're constantly at a state of being impregnated so that they can produce all this dairy. So then they have to treat them with antibiotics. So if you are going to have dairy, I would always say try and have organic or local or grass-fed if you can, because there is still cleaner ways to do this, or some other alternate dairies like a sheep's milk or a goat's milk or something like that. These are made in the more traditional ways.
Got it.
So look, I'm so not a fan of like, don't do this and don't do that and don't, and too much information can be like overload, and then you're like, I give up. I give up.
Sure.
There's so much information out there. But for me, these are like just the baseline. If you know these certain things, you can kind of, again, it's just that reset, and then you can reintroduce again and eat in balance and in harmony. Like I'm very much, and it might, like I said, it might work for you. Some people might have grown up on cheese and it's really nourishing for them because it reminds them of their childhood, and that's like a healing energy. So like, I'm really big about just let's
listen to
figure
your
out,
body.
listen, who are you first? Like that's step one. Step two is like, okay, if you've got some severe issues, great. Let's do a reset. Let's remove some of these things from your diet. So dairy,
and what are
gluten.
those other? Yeah. So dairy, gluten. What are the other 3?
Soy, so soya sauce. Dairy is also eggs. Eggs are probably on a category all on its own. Some people do really well on eggs. Some people don't. Eggs can be very triggering. And some people don't even know that they have bad gas or not going to the bathroom correctly. So eggs is one of those ones, unless they're, again, organic and, on the farm.
Yeah.
The other 2 would be alcohol and caffeine. I put that in a chapter together. Alcohol and caffeine are highly acidic for the body. Alcohol is a depressant, and it just takes you out of your present state of being. So we would remove it for a moment just to see if your body can have a reset, and if there is any, less bloating, less, brain fog, or just not feeling present. I'm not against caffeine. There is, again, just not having 10 cups of coffee a day. Maybe we just bring it down to 1, or let's try something cleaner like a caffeine, like matcha or green tea or something, or even cacao has caffeine in it. So really just finding alternate things that make you feel better. And then the last one's sugar. So sugar, again, is, it's been so processed and removed, and it is added to everything. There is not a single packaged good or anything that can live in your cupboard for more than a week is generally going to have some form of a stabilizer in the form of corn or soy or sugar or wheat. So these are just ingredients, I should say, that have been modified and can have these, inflammatory precursors in your body. So it's just being aware. Yeah, soy and corn are definitely up there in the ones that I would remove. But the caffeine and sugar, when I'm doing a reset, there are 2 more that I would say. But the ingredients list, we'd look at the soy, the corn, the dairy, the gluten, and then the caffeine and the sugar are just ones that if we're doing you were talking about a cleanse.
Lovers, thank you again for tuning in. If you enjoyed the show, hit subscribe and head over to eatplaysex.com. to connect with me and grab my sexy guides. Because my goal here is to get you to eat, play, and sex better. so you can improve your sex life, which will improve every aspect of your life. Until next time, keep it sexy.